Want to look deeper into these developments? We're going to be joined from Doha, Qatar by Giorgio Cafiero. He's the CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics. In Washington, Varsha Koduvayur. She is the senior research analyst on Gulf states at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. But let's start in the studio with Dr. Michal Ya'ari, lecturer on Saudi Arabia and ties between Israel and the Gulf at the Open University. And Michal, this threat from Iran, it's not new for the Gulf states. It's been for already decades. Why just in the last few years is it drawing them closer to Israel?
Well, there's no doubt that the more the Iranian threat increases, the greater the cooperation between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Since 2011, the outbreak of the Arab Spring, the influence of Iran in the weak Arab state increases. And Saudi Arabia was actually drawn into more aggressive policy towards Iran. And we have to keep in mind that both Saudi Arabia and Israel were very disappointed from Obama administration. In the Saudis' eyes, in the Israeli eyes, Obama signed an agreement with their biggest enemy. Obama chose the devil himself over a reliable ally. So that was actually the moment that Saudi Arabia understood very clearly that there's only one state that has both capabilities and intentions to deter Iran, and that is Israel. Meaning Israel is no longer part of the problem, but actually part of the solution. That is the reason.
Which is a radical shift. Giorgio, I'm interested in your take. Speaking from Doha, from Qatar, we're observing this trend heavily from our part of the Middle East. What are you observing? What do you think are the main factors driving this? Is this Iran increasing its presence? Is it the U.S. rolling back its presence?
I think when we look at the grander geopolitical context, both of these factors are absolutely in play. You know, for all of the differences between the Arab Gulf states and Israel, well, at least most of the Arab Gulf states and Israel seem to find themselves in the same boat on a whole host of security issues. The Saudis, Bahrainis, and Emiratis see Iranian-backed groups, Iranian allied groups, whether they're in Iraq, Bahrain, Syria, or Yemen, as a very big threat to their security. Israel, of course, is seeing Iranian allied actors in Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon threatening them. And there is definitely a decline of U.S. influence in the region. And I think the Israeli government and the Arab Gulf monarchies are sort of looking long-term. They know that all 7 of these countries are going to remain in the Middle East permanently, and I think they see it as in their interests to enhance some cooperation, although it remains to be seen how soon these relations can become, official. I think probably Arab Gulf states and Israel will cooperate tacitly, but probably not officially, at least for some more time to come.
Well, Varsha, let's pick up on that last point. What is hindering that relationship between Israel and the Gulf states from moving into a really open cooperation and full relations?
I think the outlook for above-the-table cooperation between Israel and the Gulf states does remain sort of longer term, mostly because while there are a host of shared security concerns between Israel and the Gulf states, and lately, as we are seeing with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and some of the Gulf countries that are undertaking some economic liberalization measures, they're looking towards Israel's economic success, particularly in technology, as a model that they can follow and as a source that they can tap into in order to fulfill their own economic diversification ambitions. So the shared glue that's binding Israel and the Gulf states is very much there. But that said, as long as the issue of Palestine remains unsolved, it's highly unlikely that we're going to see full normalization or full diplomatic ties being established. And while the Gulf states have changed their antagonism towards Israel, part of that comes down to this lasting gridlock gridlock we've seen in Palestinian politics for so long. It appears to me that the Gulf states are frustrated with the infighting between Hamas and Fatah and the fact that Palestinian politics have been stalemated for so long. But that said, the issue of Palestine continues to be a very emotive one to Arab audiences, not to mention that Gulf leaders have spent decades casting themselves as fighters of the Palestinian cause. Right. So for them to make any concessions towards Israel, for them to normalize before a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would probably result in a lot of domestic.
Varsha, I'm going to stop.